In this last concept, concept 3, we will be talking about defense. So this is our body's reaction to being invaded by either a bacteria or virus. So in general, one key component for maintaining homeostasis in our body is protection against disease. And homeostasis is our ability to have balance and maintain normal equal levels of all processes in our body. So if we look at this, all organisms have disease-fighting mechanisms, but vertebrates, which include humans as well as anything else with a backbone, specifically have immune systems. So we have special functions that help us fight against these mechanisms. So what our immune system does for us is that it is a network of organs that work together to recognize, fight, and defend against our foreign substances at the cellular level. So they are fighting in different ways, but they are defending our body from these foreign substances. So as we look at how these are causing diseases in our body, first let's review some terms. So we have the term pathogen, and as we've said before, these are organisms or viruses that can cause disease. And so notice that we said or viruses because technically our viruses do not count as living things, so that's why we include the word or. But either one, bacteria, organisms, or viruses act similarly in the body in that they cause the formation of antigens. So antigens are foreign substances that act as signaling molecules to induce an immune response in the body. So there's different ways that this happens, but they always produce the production of antibodies. And so these antibodies are what is really in fighting your infections. And so antibodies are a type of protein. If we recall from biology, proteins have a whole bunch of different functions, and antibodies is one of those. But antibodies are proteins used by the immune system to help neutralize our pathogens. So they're really the ones out fighting them. So if we look at the overview of the immune system, the goal is always for your immune system to detect and to deflect pathogens. So if this doesn't work, it will also then try to destroy them, but we would rather not get to this point and keep them from happening in the first place. So if we get to this destroy point, we need to fight against those pathogens. So we will specifically use our white blood cells, and the fancy term for these is lymphocytes, white blood cells, and they play a significant role in this fighting off process. They are the things that are out producing our antibodies, and they are going to engulf our invaders, so they're literally eating them, and they tag pathogens for killing them. They also are special in that they have memory, so they can remember things so that they can fight off those same attacks in the future. And then eventually our goal is that we will reach immunity, and immunity is when an organism has developed enough defense to successfully avoid an invasion from that pathogen again. We're going to talk about two different types of immunity, but first is called innate immunity. And when we're looking at this, it is special because it is non-specific. So it's going to react the same regardless of what type of thing is infecting you. And both plants and our animal cells have these types of defenses that are non-specific. So they act as a first and a second line of defense, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. And something that's really good about our innate immunity, it's non-specific, which means that it can happen really fast. So it has a rapid response time between 0 and 96 hours. So 96 hours seems like a lot, but from having one cell within a few days, your body will be taking over with those reactions. So we're going to look at some different mechanisms in which your body does innate immunity. And the first one of these is physical barriers like mucus. So your body works really well, and we need mucus. You often only think about mucus when you have too much of it, but mucus is something that you have in all different places in your body, not just in your respiratory system. But we know it's something that catches foreign substances, and then you'll usually either sneeze them out or cough them out. Another example is antimicrobial proteins like lysosomes and defensins. So if we remember lysosomes, they are an organelle, and if you remember, they cause apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. And they're also out killing things in the cells. So they're full of enzymes that are going to be able to break down things really fast. So another example then is signaling proteins like interferons, which is going to allow your cells to communicate with each other. Inflammation. So anytime you are swollen in your body, it's sending extra blood there, and that means it's also sending those extra white blood cells, which are the cells that are actually fighting your immune system. And then we have phagocytosis, and this is what your white blood cells are going to be doing. Phagocytosis is when they're eating those other cells, when they're engulfing them. So as we said, our innate immunity has both a first and a second line of defense. So if we start by talking about the first line of defense, this means the things that are happening first or kind of automatically. So our first line of defense is our external things, and you'll see we have a picture of skin over here as one of our examples, and the skin is the first thing we're talking about, and this is a huge line of defense. If you think about it, this is like covering over your entire body that is protecting your insides from the outside environment. So one of our biggest protection mechanisms is our skin itself. And then we have our mucous membranes. And again, we talked about mucus is something that we all have, and it's something we actually need. And mucus lines the openings in the skin in order to protect our respiratory, our digestive, urinary, and our reproductive tracts. So mucus, while we think about it just in like our respiratory system, it really is all over the body and does a great job at protecting us. And then we have our second line of defense, and our second line of defense acts internally rather than our first line is external. So we're a little further down the line here. So the first thing that happens is a fever. And a fever works by increasing metabolism of cells so that they can heal faster. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but a fever is actually a good thing for you if you are sick. So oftentimes it is better for you to let your fever run rather than taking medicine to get rid of your fever. Your fever is actually helping you. It happens for a reason. And then with that, we also have different chemical signals that happen throughout our body, and these are part of our internal defense system. And then inflammation, this is a big one, and it acts as sort of an internal fire alarm, and this is working by drawing attention to where your problem is at, and it's going to bring other things into that area. So inflammation is going to swell and bring in more blood and all these other things. So it's letting that area know something is wrong. And then lastly, we have our defense cells, which are things like our white blood cells. So if we look at our defensive cells, our white blood cells, we're going to first focus on phagocytes. And these are defensive cells that are eating pathogens to get rid of them. That's actually what the term phagocyte means. So if we look at this, our first example is neutrophils. There's actually a lot more than what we're going to go through, but neutrophils is our most abundant white blood cell, and this is something that leads to pus formation in your bodies. And a second example is a macrophage. And macrophages use cytoplasmic extensions to reel in and eat bad stuff. And so again, that's the whole name here of phagocytes. If we look over here, phagocytosis is literally the ingestion of pathogens. So that's what these cells are named after, the fact that they are killing these cells by essentially eating them. That brings us to our second type of cells, which are the natural killer cells. And these are also defensive cells, and they kill your own cells by triggering apoptosis. So if they see that your cells are infected, it will bring about this apoptosis process. And if we remember, apoptosis is programmed cell death. So they help our cells by killing tumors and virus-infected cells. So if we know that it's a tumor cell, your body's going to try to go ahead and kill it. And other uses would be that they release this special enzyme of perforin, which is a protein, which helps to create pores in the cell of the membrane of the infected cell through which they can inject enzymes that will stimulate the cell to do apoptosis. So they work by creating little holes, that way they can go through and kill the cell.